Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meeting, October the 22nd, 2024 at 9 a.m. in Council Chambers. So first off is the approval of the agenda and any late items. No, thank you. Could we have a motion, please? Councillor King, Councillor Poderica, all in favor. Thank you. And the Committee of the Whole minutes of October the 8th. We have a motion to accept those, please, and adopt them. Thank you. Councillor Bennett, Councillor Chong, all in favor. Thank you. And we'll go down to staff reports. And the first staff report is surface water treatment plant update. Mr. Risling.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Council knows, there's been a lot of work behind the scenes in progressing this project. Probably is our biggest project we've ever had on record, and is extremely important to the residents and businesses and our visitors. I'm not going to go through the report in too much detail, other than just definitely has been a significant increase from numbers that have been advertised before. I just want to remind the public that the numbers that were produced before did not include a lot of pieces such as land acquisition, etc. Within the report, there have been changes in the last week or so. It's a pretty fluid process, and more information is accumulated daily. So within the report, it talks about the cost of the project, and the number that is within the report is incorrect. It's actually 82 million. For the guesstimated number at this point. So I'll leave it at that, because we have an incredible individual right now that's going to present what has been going on for the past several months. Colliers has been of enormous support in basically leading this project and doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So I'll pass it off to Ms. Lamberts, and she can take it from here.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. Welcome.
Great. Thank you. And can everyone hear me?
Yes,
Excellent.
we can.
And Ben, are you able to share the screen?
Yes, I'm just pulling it up here. Apologies, 1 second. Okay. Sorry. Should be seeing it flash up on your screen.
Great. If you want
Yes,
to
we can see it.
into
Thank
presenter
you.
mode, we can get going.
Yeah, I'm just toggling here. Okay. Okay.
Can you change it to presenter mode, Ben?
Oh, apologies. I thought I had. It is presenter mode on mine, but doesn't appear to be showing it that way for you guys. It's not allowing me to do that. Stop share. Okay. Okay. Try one more time here, and then otherwise I might just have to expand it. Okay. Is that working now, Angela?
It is. Great. Thank you.
Great.
So if you want to go up just to the first, there we go. So thank you. Thank you very much for having us. We, as Rod mentioned, we've been working with the town to help further develop the water treatment plant program and continue pushing it forward, as it is a very critical project for the town. So we're happy to be here today to present some of the progress to date. Go ahead, Ben. So we'll briefly touch on an overview of the progress and what we will discuss in the report. We'll touch on the project progress update, so the various different facets of the project that have been going forward. We'll speak about the value analysis that has been initiated fairly recently and is ongoing, as well as funding and then next steps. Next slide. So to start off with the overview, so the purpose of the presentation today is to provide an update and inform council of the water treatment plant planning progress and provide a summary of the work completed since August 2024. And so ongoing work does include program development, water quality sampling, planning and procurement for a surface water piloting facility, and planning for an archaeological overview assessment. In September 2024, the province did recommend to the town of Osoyoos at the UBCM conference that a value analysis is completed. And so that work is underway, and integration of that work into the program planning is also ongoing. And that speaks mostly to the timing of the value analysis in relation to other pieces of work that are ongoing. And so when we're talking about updates to schedule with respect to this value analysis, it's mostly us needing to take a look at any additional adjustments because of this new piece of work. In the areas of progress, program development work completed since August does include project budgeting, risk workshop, project delivery workshop, project scheduling, and a capital reprioritization workshop. And the future planned work includes finalizing the program plan, undertaking the value analysis, market sounding, and financial analysis. And we'll get into a little bit more detail as we go forward here. Next slide. Project progress update. I won't go through this in detail, but this is a diagram of the history of the project and the key project milestones and deliverables since 2018. And so that starts off with some work that was being undertaken by True Engineering with respect to the groundwater treatment facility, which ultimately was that information was used as part of the application for funding that ultimately resulted in the funding agreement that the town now has with Municipal Affairs. And so that funding agreement does cover the groundwater treatment facility that was contemplated at that time. Since then, there was the piloting work that occurred, financial plan update. There was a request for pre-qualifications for water treatment plant engineering services, for which two firms were shortlisted. So that's Carollo Engineers and Associated Engineering. And very quickly after that happened, Carollo Engineers was engaged to undertake the source water feasibility assessment to look at the groundwater and surface water facility feasibility, as well as cost estimates. And using that report, based on that report, there was an update to the Committee of the Whole where there was a recommendation to Council to pursue the surface water treatment facility option. Subsequent to that, the work on sampling and piloting planning was initiated to help inform the design of the water treatment facility. And the siting assessment for the water treatment plant was also initiated. Right around the same time, Colliers was brought on board, and so that work had already started as Colliers was engaged. And since then, we've been further developing the program and overseeing and working with Carollo on its development. Interior Health did issue a letter to the town of Osoyoos outlining some of the requirements around the project execution, including the requirement for sampling of the surface water of Osoyoos Lake, as well as submission of a final plan for development and execution of the plant by Q3 2025. Next slide. So the three key areas that we're working on are program development, the piloting and sampling, and the siting assessment. So from the program development perspective, there has been an updated program budget developed. We'll get into that in a minute. Project schedule. There was a risk workshop held and facilitated by Colliers, a capital reprioritization workshop, and a project delivery review workshop. Next steps on the program development side of things include the value analysis, a market sounding. The market sounding is a follow-up to the project delivery review, and that's essentially to obtain industry input on the project delivery method that has been identified as a preferred project delivery method by the town, as well as to obtain input on project risks and other delivery items. In addition, financial analysis will be completed and the program plan will be finalized. From the piloting and sampling component of work, as I mentioned, Carollo was developing the sampling and piloting plan, and that was developed and finalized. The intake design, the surface water intake at the Irrigation 8 pump station was designed, procured, and installed, and that's specifically just for the sampling work. So a very small piece of pipe was added to the intake to allow for ongoing sampling of the lake water quality. The sampling equipment was designed and procured, and it will be installed before the end of the month here. And grab sampling commenced in August 2024. And so the depth of the intake at the time of the final construction is anticipated to be deeper than the existing intake. And so grab sampling at that depth has occurred and started to occur in August. The piloting facility RFP was advertised, and so that's for a vendor to supply, design, and commission a piloting facility. And again, that piloting facility will provide inputs on optimizing the design of the water treatment plant. Next steps in terms of piloting and sampling include continuous sampling equipment installation, continued grab sampling, and piloting RFP award and installation of the facility. In terms of the siting assessment, we had an initial workshop facilitated by Carollo on initial findings of a number of sites. I think it was 7 or 8 sites that were originally reviewed and assessed by Carollo, and then a short list of options was developed. And based on that short list, some more detailed cost estimates were provided, and that report was received by the project team on October 15th, 2024. So the next steps will be reviewing the draft siting report, reviewing and updating the risk contingency and therefore the budget based on the findings of the report, completing an archaeological overview assessment, environmental site assessment, and geotechnical field assessment based on the findings and how the team wishes to proceed with the site. Next slide, Ben. So from a program development perspective on the project budget, so the total project budget is approximately 8.4 million. And so that is the correct number. I think there was possibly a clerical error on the update that Rod was referring to at the beginning of the meeting there. The total project budget is 80.4 million. The total contingency is 6.58 million. And so just to clarify, I know there have been some numbers that have been circulated around. And so some of that contingency is for the design aspect of the project, and some of it is for kind of the overall delivery and construction of the project. And so that contingency is managed just as 2 different items in the budget. And overall, it is 6.58 million. A risk workshop, as I mentioned, was held, facilitated by Colliers. This is a typical process that we go through as we're developing projects and developing budgets to more clearly and specifically identify contingency values for specific risks in the project so that they can be properly planned and accounted for in the program budget. And so that included attendance from the town administration, True Engineering, and of course Colliers. Based on risks that were identified, we did obtain some additional input from Carollo engineers on helping to quantify some of those additional risks. So some of the key risks that were identified, but of course not a full list, includes insufficient capital budget. So we do know there's a gap in the available funding for the current project and the budget of the project. Cost increases due to escalation, inflation, and interest. And so the initial budget that was identified in April did not include inflation for to bring us out to when those construction costs would actually be received and firmed up. So that has been included in the contingency. Different siting requirements have slightly different costs depending on their location. For example, for the length of pipe that might be required to get to the facility. And so those risks were also added to the program budget as we have not landed on a site for the water treatment plant, as well as land acquisition, permitting, and value analysis delays. And so with any delays, that kind of brings us back to the item on escalation and inflation. So whenever we're seeing major potential for delays in the project, those costs for escalation and inflation are added for contingency as well. Next slide, please. A capital reprioritization workshop was held to help to identify what the possible internal town funding could be used for helping to close the gap in funding for the project. And so the purpose was to review and identify adjustments to the town water capital plan specifically in support of the project, to then confirm based on what internal funding is available, how much that leaves for the required funding going forward. So the workshop was facilitated by Colliers and attended by the town, True Engineering, and ourselves, of course. Next slide, please. We also undertook a project delivery review workshop. And so this was held to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of various project delivery methods. This was attended by the town, True Engineering, and Colliers. And we reviewed a number of different potential project delivery methods, including design bid build, construction management at risk, progressive design build, or PDB, and integrated project delivery. The town did identify that a progressive design build project delivery methodology is the preferred method for the project. And we've listed here some of the key reasons for that. And some folks might not be aware of what a progressive design build methodology is, but these are some of the really key benefits that make it kind of unique and stand out and make it the preferred delivery method. So the first one is that there is an immediate contractor collaboration and engagement in the project team and a sense of ownership and accountability of the contractor within the design and the construction. And so that allows for both scope and schedule savings, which translate into cost savings for the project. So this is a really important and critical piece that we've seen the market moving towards fairly significantly over the last few years. And it does help to de-risk the project from that perspective. From a schedule risk management perspective, it does allow for expedited schedule. One of the reasons is because it allows for a single procurement for a design build team, which starts with a pre-construction services contract that looks very similar to a consulting services contract, after which once a price is agreed to that has been submitted by the proponent, then the town can immediately move on to a design build contract. And so that eliminates one procurement for the town in the overall project delivery. It also allows for construction services to start while some portion of the design is still occurring. And because of that, it allows for a bit of an expedited schedule. It also allows for cost risk management. So as I noted, the proponent will provide a price based on the requirements for the project that are developed with the town at the table participating in that process. And if that cost cannot be agreed upon, then the town does have the option to reprocure the construction, the remaining design and construction component of the project to get more competitive pricing. And finally, the balance of resources requirements. So it does require town participation in the process. However, it's not typically for the full project. It's mostly for the first portion of the project before the project gets flipped to a design build contract where the proponent really takes off and runs with it. Next step, next slide, Ben.
And Angela, I'm just going to do a time check. I think we only have until past.
Okay, great.
So
Thanks, Ben.
Halfway to go through here.
Yeah, it's you can take additional time, so don't
Okay.
worry about going over.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Well, we're getting a freeze here. There we go.
The project schedule here we have adjusted based on that progressive design build delivery model. And so this shows an updated schedule that reflects that. As I mentioned, the schedule does not include the requested value analysis. And so we are working at integrating how that will fit into the project and if any of these milestones need to be adjusted. So that will be happening over the next month. The project does entail risks with which directly impact the project schedule. And to the extent possible, those have been quantified through that risk workshop that I talked about. The specific float for those schedule risks, which is essentially the amount of schedule that should sort of be added on for planning purposes. It hasn't been added on. We're going to review that over the coming months as well. But this does reflect our current assessment of how the project will be executed. There are potential schedule delays pertaining to site acquisition, archaeological assessments, and permitting. And those, again, will be reassessed as more accurate information becomes available. And we are actively communicating updates to project stakeholders at this time, including Interior Health, as well as the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, to help keep them informed about the work that's ongoing. Next slide, Ben. In terms of the lake water quality sampling, Interior Health is a proponent of the sampling to understand the water quality. So of course, with a surface water treatment facility, it's important to understand the characteristics of the water quality. And so, interestingly, the town or the Osoyoos Lake has not had a significant amount of sampling done in prior years. There is some available data, but to get the data that we really need at the depth, that's what makes the sampling important. So the sampling program will enable continuous water sampling at both the existing facility. So the sampling began in June. The sampling planning began in June. Sampling began in August. Carrillo Engineers is providing oversight, analysis, and reporting of the data. And we are having quarterly sampling meetings with Interior Health to provide them updates on that work. In terms of the surface water treatment piloting, so there was an RFP advertised in September to retain a technology vendor to design, supply, and commission the facility.
The RFP is anticipated to close on November 15th, at which point the proposals will be evaluated and the highest scored vendor will complete the design, supply, and installation and commissioning. The town and an electrical contractor will complete the installation of the facility, and then the vendor will be there to help commission it and ensure that the facility is going to run properly and according to the specifications. The facility is planned to operate until October 2025.
And so I'll speak to this next piece on value analysis. In our engagements with the province, there's been a couple pieces of information that they've shared with us and some suggestions about how this water treatment plant program can be delivered. One was on collaborative delivery models. So they did give us some inputs and advice on looking at alternative delivery models. And so that's where we went back with the town and looked at those different procurement methods, and that's how we wound up on Progressive. And I just wanted to touch back on that point because that's taking their consideration or their advice into consideration. And they were pretty satisfied to see that delivery model come out as a result because it allows that integrated team approach and it allows you to bring market insights forward to your project development, which means you can kind of de-risk the project a bit better. And the next piece that they've suggested more recently is value analysis. And so I've taken some time here to put down a few points about the work that has been underway already with the Soyuz from both Colliers, from their engineering partners in Carollo and True. And so we've identified that. We're going to speak about the process and how we conveyed that information to the province as well. So what is value analysis? It's a series of specific steps or phases which are used to analyze a project and develop alternatives to make sure that we're achieving the desired outcomes. It allows the team to effectively and efficiently identify alternative ways to achieve that outcome. And it's very transparent and collaborative process. So our process has involved options analysis of different source waters or different components, collaborative workshopping between two different engineering partners in True and Carollo, between the town of Osoyoos, the administration, and between Colliers as well. We've reviewed in detail quite a few costing assumptions that were developed from different engineering partners. It was a really good process of kind of benchmarking assumptions because we've had two different kind of source waters evaluated, but they were evaluated under different assumptions. And so we came together to say, okay, we assumed this much demand or this much water conservation. What's a reasonable assumption that we can all agree on to make sure that we can responsibly compare these two different options? But it's more than just comparing those two options. It's about analyzing the whole project overall to make sure that we're identifying the right life cycle of the project, how long it should serve, the volume of water, the quality, and where the right location can be for that. This also gives us the opportunity to improve knowledge of all parties, where we have certain specialists that are bringing different knowledge to the table. And as I've mentioned, it has two different engineering firms, the unbiased third party in ourselves and Colliers that also has some SMEs, subject matter experts on our team as well. So what's the so what? So why does this matter? Well, the value analysis aligns the definition of the project. It really centers what is the key objective and what's important metrics to measure success by. So that recenters the understanding and all the measurements of the project values. It generates a cost and schedule savings while achieving the required functions. It improves our engagement. And it also clarifies the objective option selection amongst competing priorities and solutions. It improves asset performance, reliability, and minimizes lifecycle costs. And that's a key challenge of a lot of infrastructure projects now is not just focusing on the upfront capital expenditure cost, but once we've built that asset, what's it going to cost us over the life to operate and maintain it? And there's been a lot of good work and research now that's going into that because that's the real true cost of this facility going forward, to make sure that there's no surprise costs or requirements that come up in year 10 or 20. So here's the work that's been underway so far for the value analysis. We've had a collaborative workshop already with engineering parties, ourselves, and Osoyoos. This is where we were doing a benchmarking exercise on assumptions and inputs. And it was a real great kind of collaborative, transparent process where we talked with an engineering firm and said, okay, your assumption was X on this input. And on this side of the table, we had Y. Both of these are reasonable assumptions in a vacuum, but let's talk about trying to find a middle ground that's reasonable for this project. And I think both parties, including the town ourselves, are all kind of willing to lean in on that and find a consensus on that, which has been really helpful. The province has signaled that they will support a minor amendment to the existing funding agreement that we have so that we can cover some financial, some of the value analysis costs, the work that we're doing right now, and some of the piloting work as well. And the piloting work is schedule sensitive. So they've agreed, and so is the Interior Health agreed that it makes sense to continue on with that work. And so we're doing that. The province supports a funding agreement scope amendment upon completion of the value analysis process. And the request to pursue the value analysis will require adjustments to project planning, to scope and schedule and budget, and revisions will be made as the requirements are finalized. So we're going to go through this value analysis process right now with the project team. We're going to make sure that we're adjusting the project as necessary so that it's best value for citizens, for taxpayer dollar, and that it's delivering reliable water. Agreement. Okay. So the current funding agreement scope includes the groundwater facility design and construction. And so we're going to, as discussed, make a minor amendment to the scope so that we can cover that value analysis and the piloting, and the province has been in support of that. And then there's an anticipated future amendment, which will be a larger amendment to cover the full project scope once it's finalized after the value analysis process. And the funding agreement reporting requirements will necessitate environmental design considerations as well. Okay, so here's a bit of a progress highlights and some of the actions that have taken place to date. So the value analysis, this was an opportunity when we could come back to the province and say, you've requested a value analysis. We want to share with you actually some of the good due diligence that has been undertaken by the town already that really kind of shows some of the work that could take place during a value analysis process. So that's been conveyed to them. They actually acknowledged that effort and said, okay, this is great. We don't want to recreate any of your efforts. But once we see kind of where you've landed after that value analysis process, then we can decide on next steps, which could include more detail in a certified value analysis process, or they may decide that this looks like enough due diligence has been done and we can go forward. Sampling and piloting, continue performing, reporting, and monitoring the water treatment sampling and piloting exercise to inform the design requirements. Funding, as necessary, engage in discussions to amend the funding agreement to pursue the defined scope of work. And so we'll reapply for that additional funding. And then citing, there's a siting assessment that has been completed. So we're in the process of evaluating and validating that siting assessment and then working towards a decision on a site. Other ongoings, commence progress of other key works, including the archaeological overview assessment, environmental works, geotechnical works, and financial assessments as well. So one of the inputs to the financial assessments was the capital program reprioritization exercise, but also doing a comparison of the project financial analysis reports so that we can understand the cash flow of money coming in through revenues and water rates and the true cost of the building and the operating the facility to make sure that all the costs are covered going forward and so there's no surprises.
Thank you very much for a very interesting and detailed report that you've given us. Is it possible to take a minute to see if there are any questions from council or anybody at the table? Would that be all right?
Yes.
Mr. Rismic, that's okay? Yeah. Okay. Council, anybody have any questions or need clarification or would like to ask any questions of Colliers? Go ahead, Councillor Chong.
Thank you. So I've been taking a few notes and along the way because I didn't want to interrupt the presentation, didn't want to interrupt your flow. So I guess the first one, historically speaking, with your most recent projects, how accurate is the contingency approximation?
Go ahead. Would
Thanks.
one of you be able to answer that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can speak to that. So what we typically do on our risk contingency is we identify a contingency at the beginning of a project and then progressively elaborate the risk contingency as we go. I think that's a great question, and I think it really depends on the project. I don't think I can provide a clear answer on, on how close those contingencies have been. Apart to say that, every project is kind of very unique and has its own risks that need to be reviewed on a regular basis. And again, having that project contingency progressively elaborated. I would also add that we've seen a lot where a cost will be provided to council that has been done at various different classes or types of estimates. And so when your cost estimate is still at a very high level, just within that cost estimate for the work that needs to be done as part of the project, there's a contingency that should typically be added. It's either plus 30% or minus 30%. So your budget is somewhere between that kind of band of cost. And so when we're budgeting overall, we need to kind of go in with that higher cost contingency. And so that is a major difference in what you're seeing today versus what you were seeing in April. So we added on that 30% overall cost contingency to be reflective of the level of accuracy and depth of the cost estimate that was undertaken.
Thank you. Did you have anything else?
Yes.
Go ahead, for sure.
And so just as a follow-up to your response, my understanding is there are industry standards and definitions for different classifications of like high, medium, low estimations with their relative kind of standard deviations for contingency. And I guess just to clarify, mostly for the public's sake, as the project progresses, we get more data, more information, and that changes the classification of the estimate of the budget. And with that, we can then further kind of narrow down that standard deviation. But that doesn't mean that the contingency decreases. It could very well increase, but it is a more accurate contingency estimation. Would that be correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then another question, just because it's been brought up from our constituents and residents, the timeline. So in terms of if there is, for example, like a 6-month delay, and this might be again another difficult question to have a finite answer on, but for example, a 6-month delay, in terms of approximate increase in cost, like let's say if you can give like a percentage, how does that reflect to the overall project cost? So if a project has a defined budget but then is delayed 6 months, how does that reflect on that budget?
Sure. I can take that one, Angela. So one of the benefits of the progressive design build model that we've taken is that we can provide affordability thresholds to your selected proponent upfront. And so what that does is that signals to them, here are our performance requirements of the project, and here is our affordability limit. And then the project the contractor consultant team, works towards developing your project, designing it, de-risking it. And then after a certain period of time, they provide you a price. And if that price is not within your affordability threshold, then there's contractual language that you can put into that agreement that has what we would term as an off-ramp. So if it doesn't meet your affordability threshold, then you have the contractual option to exit that agreement with the contractor. That's not preferential, obviously, for the town because they do want to advance this project, but there is a language in there that gives you that flexibility. The other benefit is that you're signaling to the project code the entire time, here's what our affordability limit is. And so having that contractor designer engaged from the start allows them to target that, but to work towards optimizing the project to meet performance requirements while not having any unnecessary elements to it, or looking for value engineering paths that could help them reduce costs or reduce schedule. And so that's kind of the benefit of getting the early contractor involvement. One is to try and mitigate cost overages and schedule overages.
Can I just jump in with one thing that I figure has something to do with this? My assumption is that the water sampling that's been required that will go on for a year, that obviously is going to slow the whole progress down, isn't it? So that I'm wondering if that's what Councillor Chong was referring to. The fact that we're going to have to slow things down a bit until we find out about the water sampling and what the results of that are. Is that correct?
Okay, I understand. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So the water sampling began in August, as I noted. And so a year would be Q3 or Q4 of 2025 when all of the analysis would be completed. And we do anticipate that timing would fall around the same time as your preliminary design, which is the stage in the project where you would want to be integrating that data. So as the current schedule has been identified right now, we don't anticipate that the sampling would actually delay the project. It will actually be providing input at the correct times to facilitate the current project delivery schedule.
Thank you. Can I let Councillor Bennett jump in with a question, then we'll go back to you, Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess my biggest concern is cost overrides. And we've seen some major cost overrides on other water plants in BC in the last couple of months. Were they not using this same system? Or is this system going to prevent that? Or how do we protect ourselves from those cost overrides? Thank you.
Absolutely. So some elements have been incorporated by others, and then at the province's encouragement, they do ask that you consider these collaborative models where you get earlier contractor participation. So we talked about a couple of the reasons why that's good. Another reason is it's bringing forward more recent market pricing. So they just been the project at an earlier stage, so they can sound check the pricing at an earlier stage, which is very beneficial. One of the other things that Colliers spends a lot of time doing with different towns is the market sounding process. So we did the delivery model workshop, landed on Progressive, and there's agreement internally. But then what we typically do is we go out and we engage the market. We'll talk with contractors in your area and say, hey, Soyuz is looking at delivering this program through a progressive design build. Here's the way we see things. Here's how we want to do it. What do you think about that? What has been your recent experience? And what kind of insights do you have? Or if something different, what would you like to see? And that gives a number of benefits. It socializes the project, which is very important because there is a lot of projects in the pipeline in infrastructure. It gets their input. It allows them to start thinking about teaming as well. But then they can tell us, well, we've had these hiccups before, so you might want to think about tweaking something, and then we can decide to incorporate that if it makes sense. So that kind of engagement process, we find helps make the market aware, helps us make sure that we are going forward with the right delivery model, with the hopes of running a more successful procurement. So now you've got a market that's engaged. They've had time to team. They come, and ideally you're attracting more qualified bidders to your procurement, which can help in your procurement and maybe help on the costing side as well.
Okay with that.
Now, other elements, one that the province has advocated for is this value analysis process, is doing a sense check on the project. Is this what we need? Is this what the best value for money is for the town and for the provincial taxpayer? Is there any elements in this design that maybe we haven't had a chance to reevaluate and are a little bit robust and too much for the purpose of this? And so that's where they try and look at elements that maybe we can either reduce costs or make sure that we're getting good duration out of that asset. And so those elements are approaches that you can do to try and mitigate cost overruns and try to get some control on the cost. Of course, we would always be cautious to never say that there's we've done everything and there will be no cost overruns, because we don't have the crystal ball to say that to anybody, and I don't think that would be responsible. But we are taking these steps both at our advice and at the advice of the province through their experience with other projects as well, to try and mitigate any risks to the project as best as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Chong.
Thank you. That's a perfect segue, because my next question is about the value analysis process. So in terms of time frame, and you speak of metrics and how much weight is placed on to long-term sustainability in terms of when we look at different sources of water, either it's surface water or groundwater, because I mean those are our two main options. Have you looked at future population growth and expansion of both different of the streams of water supply? Because of course, like the concern is if we do shift back to groundwater, then in X amount of years, our population growth is well, groundwater is not going to sustain that. So we're going to be having to go through this process again. So I guess it's could you give more insight onto the long-term kind of projections and value analysis with that? Thank you.
Certainly. Yeah. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Exactly. Like, what are the key points that we're trying to uncover in this value analysis? You know, we wouldn't say we want apples to apples comparison. They're two different projects and source waters. But what we are trying to do is detail out some of those assumptions, like how long does this need to last for? How much water does it need to supply for what population? What quality? So that we're designing these facilities to meet similar performance requirements. And so that is part of the value analysis process, is saying, here's how many years it should be operational for, and here's the projected demand that it should meet. And other metrics like that I cited before. SOS has implemented a water conservation piece of work. So what is the assumption around the uptake on that, right? And making sure that we're comparing that equally between the two different projects. So those are the pieces that we're doing right now, Councillor Chun, to make sure that we're in agreement about what is a responsible amount of time to make sure that this is being designed for, so that SOS into the future is covered. And that's the process that we're going through right now in the value analysis. Now, in terms of the metrics that you kind of asked about, we have an opportunity to somewhat shape those, because there's also like strategic objectives from the town. The town has input into that to say, here's what's really important to us Soyuz. You know, we identify as this type of community. This is how our population needs to be served. These are the businesses that are important here, or the tourism that's important here. And so this is what's really valuable to us, to make sure that we are getting the right value out of it. And so the value analysis process is really it's like a framework process to make sure that all of those elements are being thought of, and that there's a methodical approach to going through to extracting the best value, and then just uncovering decisions that maybe hadn't been addressed. And so having that process to kind of rely on, it gives a little bit more granularity to some of the decisions that were made in the past. Does that help kind of answer your question?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
So thank you both very much for providing the answers, and it's a lot to absorb. But we have a printed copy this morning of your report, and we will certainly look through it. And we appreciate you taking the time to come on and explain things to us. And I know that we'll be talking to you again, and we'll probably have more questions. So thank you very much to both of you.
Our pleasure.
For having us.
So next on our agenda is the Mr. Davis. Director Davis is going to talk to an intent to lease Oliver and District Arts Council.
There will be a report coming to council in relation to our asset management program for all facilities, and this is actually in the works right now. With that, one of the items that we need to look at and bring forward is collecting some type of revenue or rental fee for the facilities that we have as an option. Those monies can be put into a reserve when we need items to be taken care of or items to be addressed in terms of capital funding. We could actually utilize some of those funds. We currently don't collect money on most of our lease agreements that we have. However, the nonprofit association that actually utilizes the facilities that are owned by the town pay for the majority of their utilities. We do collect some funding, however, but it's only equates to $1 a year. Other agreements that we have, as an example, with Desert Park, we have a partnering agreement where we do collect funds every month until they actually pay back revenue that was supplied to them to increase and fix the RV park that's up there. So with this, there's a number of recommendations before council to look, or to the committee to have a discussion to see the best foot forward in terms of how we look at our facilities, how we're going to plan for our facilities. Some of it will be contingent on the state and the structure of the facilities that we have, but I can say without a doubt that some of our facilities are at the end of their life and they need some attention. I did identify some of the items, and one of the bigger items in here for the Arts Council was the asbestos removal, which was a bit of a surprise in terms of our PCAB and our requirements that are needed or legislated to do so. And we will be dealing with more of those as we move forward, and I'm sure our CAO and our Director of Finance could attest to that. So here is the report for council to, discuss.
Thank you very much. And I see there's lots of options there that we could look at. Council, does anybody have any suggestions on this or recommendations? Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Gerald, what happens in other communities like in, say, Summerland, Oliver, communities our size? What do they do?
Some communities Some of the communities actually do charge. They are very nominal as well. Some don't charge anything. They're very similar to us. The structure that we have in collecting any type of funds have always been historically, pretty low. Other communities are in the same boat as we are, that they need to, get revenue from somewhere, and it just can't come from the taxpayer. We do have, and again, depending on what council, decides or how we move forward, we'll bring it back to the Arts Council. We did have a portion of the one of the subgroups. They were renting the Cactus Club, and they did pay. I think it was around $250 a month, mostly to cover off on the utilities and not to actually be put away for any kind of revenue or contingency. But most other communities, especially small ones our size, that have historically supported their nonprofit groups, are in the same position as we are.
Go ahead, Councillor King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If we chose to charge rent, would they still pay utilities separate on top of the rent?
Yes, they would. So, like another option, and I'm sure it's in here somewhere, is that they could be responsible for the capital improvements at a higher rate. Something that could be $1,500 to $2,000 maybe limit. Obviously, if there's an asbestos removal, that's going to be quite substantial. But having an asset management plan and knowing the condition of all our facilities, there could be an opportunity, and it wouldn't be like having, say, a project in hand. But if we knew 3 years down the road that we were going to, replace a furnace or put a new hot water tank in or upgrade our lighting, that could be planned a little bit more efficiently rather than being all of a sudden, here's a $30,000 bill that we didn't know about. And that's how we do it. The good thing too about a nonprofit association is that they have access to other funds. And we do support, all of our nonprofit groups with, nominal grant opportunities, but they have definitely access to funds that we as a municipality wouldn't, through gaming, etc. If in 2 years, 3 years, if we knew we were going to do something, that could be cost shared, could be just planned for better, just as another option.
Thank you. I know that one of the things we did with that building this year was to remove the asbestos. Mr. Zackel, can you tell us that cost and where that money came from? No.
So we had budgeted 75,000 to get the work completed. The budget or the actual cost came in substantially lower than that. So the asbestos removal has taken place. I think 95% of the work has been completed. That money came out of general reserves. So there wasn't money set aside for that at this time. We have started in 2024 putting money away for the PSAV 3280 requirements, and this was a perfect scenario for that situation. But that work was done prior to us establishing the reserves. So moving forward, our other facilities that we have those kind of cleanup to do within them, we will be budgeting to utilize those funds to pay for that.
Thank you. That's what I got. That's kind of what I thought. So it came out of general reserve, so it's general. My thinking is that if we don't collect a little bit of money from the Arts Council to add to this, then we could be stuck again dealing with some of the things that were just mentioned, like a new furnace or, I know we put in new windows in there and quite a few things. So I'm sort of leaning towards thinking we need to ask for some money and put it in the special reserves to maybe deal with this. Because if something happens, there's quite a few groups in there that'll be out of a place to work and to yeah. Go ahead.
Another thing for council to be aware and consider is I do believe that some of the artworks are sold for profit. So it is also a very fine line for that assistance to business. So charging rent for the lease protects the town as well.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll move option 4.
Do you have a question? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Is there, let me go and ask if there's a seconder for option 4, first of all. That would be that a 5-year lease at $50 a month per year. Oh, there's a couple of different ones here. $100. Okay, for the second year. So you're thinking that an increase each year. Yeah, sorry. There's too many options here. Go ahead, Councillor Poderica.
I just want to clarify that is plus utilities, just because some of these do mention utilities and some don't. Yes, okay. I'd second that.
We can definitely, clarify that for sure, and it would be utilities included as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded that we go with option 4. Go ahead, Councillor Chong.
Thank you. I just pulled up their budget, which they always have to submit with grant applications. And 2023, 2024, they had a net balance of $182. So my question would be, in terms of additional revenue generation, I mean, they do have payments to artists for sales. They do make some from the sales as well. But realistically speaking, I mean, they have access to additional grants. Like, I'm hoping that this may add additional motivation to push for more grant applications. But my concern is, let's say hypothetically they're unsuccessful with grant applications, then they'd also have to probably have potentially events for fundraising, which most of those attendees would be residents of Osoyoos as well. So kind of it's a roundabout way of residents basically still either having to pay from potentially additional taxation or residents paying out of pocket to fund this organization after these additional rent payments. So I don't really have a question. It was just more of a clarification and thinking out loud and kind of adding a bit more context to the situation as well.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Can I just add that I know several of the artists and they do sell paintings to a lot of tourists and people that come through. One artist told me the other day that she has somebody that comes through Osoyoos every year and always buys one of her paintings. So I know that it's a fairly profitable business for some of the artists for sure. But I get it. It's a change from what we've had, and so we need to think about it carefully. Go ahead. Oh.
Oh,
Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To Councillor Chong, I agree 100%. Yes, it would be a bit of a financial implication for the nonprofit groups. However, I think especially in option 4, where the fee would be so low to start out, they would be able to plan for, something as they move forward. And in reality, it's still such a cheap, rent per se to do that. But we also have our community service grants where, those nonprofit groups could apply because we have funding, and I think it was $64,000 last year, specifically for facility rental. And they could actually apply for that. It's not a long-term, grant where they need to rely on, but if they were in a hardship, say in year 1, year 2, or whatever, they could apply for that to help offset the costs, and that's what it's there for.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Matthew, Director Davis. Do we currently have requirements for a code of conduct in our lease agreements with our nonprofits?
Yes, we do. So anything that gets renewed now will definitely be included, and it is identified. We will put a little bit more verbiage and be more specific in terms of what that code of conduct means.
Go ahead, Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I heard you right. The Cactus facility was actually paying, the subgroup of the Arts Council was paying $250 a month.
Yeah, they were paying a percentage of the utilities to actually, as part of the building, as part of the agreement, so that they can actually be there, and that was separate than what they were normally would have paid, and it averaged, I think, it was 170, 180, and then towards the end it was over 200. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Number 4 on the options. And should I read it? I will. I'll read it. That council authorizes the notice of intention to lease the building located at 1A District 2450S, Similkameen Division, Yale District, Plan 120, to the Osoyoos District Arts Council for a 5-year term at a rate of $50 per month for year 1, $100 a month for year 2, $150 per month for year 3, $200 per month for year 4, and $250 per month for year 5. And that also includes they will pay utilities. So that was added. So it's been moved and seconded. I will call the question. All in favor? Against? That carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. And sorry? Oh, just been pointed out that we need to look at that council add to the strategic priorities chart, a multi-purpose facility that incorporates existing and potentially additional beneficial community organizations. Is that something you would like to suggest we do now? Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Obviously, we're very facility rich, but our facilities are aging, and I think there's an opportunity for us to start looking long term. What does that look like? We know some of these are nearing their end of life or require substantial improvements moving forward, and I'd like to make the motion that we add to our strategic priorities chart that begin that discussion of what does that look like long term.
Is there a seconder? Okay, thank you. Councillor Chong seconded that. We will take a vote on that one and then we'll leave it to the CAO to, okay, all in favor. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing that up. All right. We will now move over to our staff, another staff report. That would be Community Services Quarterly Report. So Director Davis, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This would be a third quarter report or an update for community services for July, August, and September. At the Sud Bowl Arena, we had our center ice clock installed and is now in full operation. We had an increase in public skating, a little higher than normal, and that does include our noon hour hockey, our moms and tots, and our public skating sessions. Cactus Kids Day Camp was super successful this year. We collected more revenue than anticipated, which was a good thing for finance. We averaged 55 children per week. During our annual pass sale in September, we sold 251 annual passes, which also increased our revenue anticipation there. The life jacket station at the marina was opened, and kudos to the RCMP and the Rotary. We are working on our Parks and Trails master plan. We had an open house, had some concepts presented. We got well over 100 respondents. We could say we got about 300 respondents, but a lot of them were redundant and didn't qualify. So that was a really good response from the community. And just working with Marmick and for asset management plan, normally for just recreation facilities that they specialize in, but we are including all of our facilities, and we're hoping to bring that forward here before the end of the year.
Thank you. I had a question, Mr. Davis. The electronic sign that is new, that's at the edge of the parking lot, I have to say that I drive by it a couple times a day. When there's more than one or two things on there, I can't read it. Now, I should be looking at the road, not at the sign, but I used to be able to sort of have a quick glance and immediately get what was advertised on there. Is there any way that that can be adjusted a bit? Sometimes the colors are kind of off, and it's not just me. I've had several residents say to me, I can't read the sign and I don't want to pull over so I can stop and read it. Is there anything that can be done about that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we can actually slow it down dramatically any speed we want. We did enhance the colors because we had a new program, but I think that was put on in July. So the colors that are on there now would definitely be better than what they were originally. But yes, we can definitely do that. It can slow it down, just keep playing as it is, but make sure they can be, read better.
And it's the size of the print too that is, I find, is difficult. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else have any? Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Gerald, just maybe with the Parks and Recreation, when we're talking about what you're doing with those right now, maybe with what Councillor Zach had just said about that building, potentially of taking a few of the older buildings and making it one building, that could be kind of go into that park plan as well, right?
That is correct. That was one of the concepts that was identified for Desert Park. And it really wasn't elaborated, I would say, to show specifically that that could be used by any or all groups. But the intention is that that would be another facility, either if it was knocked down or fully refurbished, but an opportunity for nonprofit groups to utilize that. We still have a nonprofit rate in our fees and charges, and we do have some groups who still utilize our existing facilities, obviously, and they do pay.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Davis. And we'll go on to our Corporate Services Department. Mrs. Colson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The council has before this morning the Corporate Services Department quarterly report for July to September. And it's primarily statistical data for all our operational functions. What I wanted to talk about very briefly this morning was our bylaw enforcement statistics. You'll notice that they can fluctuate quite dramatically from year to year, quarter to quarter, and the possible reasons for that. The kinds of things that could inflate those figures would be something like a blitz. Say, for instance, if we get a complaint about a particular area of bylaw infraction and Mrs. Robinson deploys the officers to go in and have a close look, and if they find a lot of infractions, that is going to drive the numbers up. One of the things that could actually lower the numbers is things like our Parks Ambassador, going out and educating residents and visitors about our bylaws, thereby preventing bylaw infractions. So you can see there is quite a wide fluctuation period to period. The other other thing that I want to mention is that when we count a number, the raw data is not necessarily very meaningful in that, say, for instance, if a bylaw enforcement officer was to be going out and checking chalked tires for parking enforcement, we could do 40, 50 in an hour. An unsightly property, which the bylaw officers have been focusing quite a bit on lately, that could take them an hour or two for one. And so all those things have to be taken into consideration when looking at the statistics.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions about this? I was just looking at the chart on page 40 of 102 and miscellaneous violations in the park bylaw. It seems to be a little lower than last year, which is, I guess, a good thing. Was that due to the park ambassador being there? Is that what you think? Good. Well, then that makes sense. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Coulson. Mr. Zackel, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So property tax collection and rural water collection went well this year, with collections happening very consistent to what previous years were. Our surplus is projected as of the third quarter. Our general fund's got a projected surplus of 1.256 million, mainly due to returns on investments and sale of equipment. Fire department's got a $48,500 surplus. The RCMP $100,000 surplus. The sewer fund $141,000 surplus, and water fund $274,000 surplus. Sunbull Arena likewise has got a small surplus projected at $33,000. So ask Council if you've got any questions regarding the financials for September.
Anybody have any questions of Director Zackel? No, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one comment, the boat trailer parking was down a lot. And I see right now we got rented out to some other parties. Is that gonna offset a lot of that parking? Or is that just a short-term couple days?
Is it a month? Okay, so those revenues will go into the boat trailer parking revenues, but I haven't seen any of those revenues flowing as of yet. Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, anything else for Director Zackel? Okay, thank you. And we'll look at the fire department now. Mr. Risling, are you going to comment on this?
Well, I got a couple quick comments. I'm always proud of our firefighters. They're paid on calls, but I call them volunteers. They get called all hours of the night, and they get a small token from a financial side, but they're always there. As you can see, they put in about this past quarter about 600 hours, and that mostly goes into a lot of it goes into training and as well as calls. Year to date, one of the good things is, I shouldn't say this because it'll possibly jinx us, number of calls are actually down, which is a positive thing, knock on wood. I think some of the other positive things that are occurring there, I know I always bring these up during my bi-weekly council update, but I'll mention again, Katie Grant and Anthony Basic received their firefighter 1001 certificates. Firefighters have been doing a lot of volunteer work. They attended 3 farmers markets. On August 17th was a pretty exciting day. They did a demonstration of a vehicle extraction, which was pretty neat, just outside of Town Hall here. And yeah, they're just always there to help the community and blend in and do various tasks when called upon. So again, I just want to thank our firefighters and the fire department as a whole.
Thank you. Yeah, I attended their open house, I think it was about a week ago, and they had lots of kids there, and they were demonstrating how to use the jaws of life and how to put out fires and so on. So I think the education component of that Fire Prevention Week is a really good thing, and we commend them for that. Did you have a question, Councillor King?
I guess just thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I just look at the emergency responses and like to see another column, how I can compare it to either the last quarter or the previous year. I know you've got a few comments under it that certain things are down, but I thought it might be easier if you just had one column on the right comparing, or if that could be done.
I completely agree. One of the things that we've been attempting to do with all our presentations is they're not completely consistent reporting previous quarters, and as well as that we've been continually modifying our performance measures so we don't have performance measures for previous years. But that is a project that's ongoing, and I completely agree with you. So it's been put down the priority list a little bit, but it's.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to Operational Services Department. That would be Mr. Risling again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think on the positive side, Operational Services has been doing an incredible job. We have several statistics here. Some are up, some are down. Many of the, especially our two acting superintendents, have been putting in enormous hours just to keep the department afloat and also doing management duties. There aren't too many surprises within the stats. Again, a few were up and a few were down. But I think the highlights of that area have been, you heard about it this morning. That's taken a significant amount of hours with regards to the water treatment plant. The Dave Gordon and Dave Steen have been assisting with a lot of the work that's been done. And as well, we know that the water meters are being installed, so they're being pulled to that. So personally, I just want to give a big shout out to that department in keeping the wheels on, and I don't think there's anything too alarming within the stats to highlight, other than I think they're maintaining status quo or pretty close to status quo from an operational perspective, but which I'm very proud of.
Thank you. I'm wondering if we, at some point, will get a report from the people from Neptune or the people doing the water meters. I understand that there have been some interesting questions asked of the town and things that, maybe they thought of, maybe they didn't. I just one off the top of my head was that the Neptune was coming to do an installation at a particular house, and the people were going away for 6 months. So, that's a kind of maybe something that hadn't been thought of, but those kinds of concerns need to be part of their plan, obviously, or maybe they know that that's something that they have to deal with. But I'm sure it sort of slows things down a little bit in the town. Is that correct? And will they come and do a report sometime?
So yes, some of these things, as far as the snowbirds, Neptune was aware, and so there was a call out to some of the snowbirds or people that if they were leaving to contact us, and they put up them in the queue. They have all types of every situation is a little bit different. There's the standard and there's these one-offs. I know that they prefer to actually have somebody within the building for the first 48 hours or something like that. So all this information is communicated to the individuals as they enter the property or set up the appointments. But we also try to update the FAQs. So if there's a question that comes in that would be a benefit to others, we try updating the FAQs. But so so you hear a lot about these one-offs, but a lot of the others are pretty cut and paste. So again, we try to do our best in communicating the information, but again, there's always these one-offs that are difficult, and we've only been into it now for about 3 weeks, and so I think they've ironed out a lot of the issues, and we'll continue moving on. So if council would like some type of an update, we can do that. It likely wouldn't be Neptune themselves.
I think it would be a good idea for us just to know, because I'm sure there are people in town saying, maybe have asked council, when is it going to be my turn? How long will this take? And those kinds of things. Has anybody noticed that? Councillor King and then Councillor Chong.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question. They put these meters in some basements and say 6 months later it starts leaking. Is the town liable? Or Neptune?
Within the contract, I can't remember the exact period of time. I think it was a year, but any leakage that occurs within the approximately a year, Neptune's responsible. Afterwards, it is the property owner. So what we've also heard from Neptune, because it was something that I'd asked them several months ago, is that the initial risk is typically in the first 24, 48 hours. That's when the soldering occurs, that type of thing. Afterwards, like once the solder is done, it's done. As far as the water meters themselves breaking and leaking, it is extremely rare for that component to actually fail and result in water damage. Like extremely rare. And if you look at them, they're kind of almost all kind of one piece. So the risk is very, very low. They have millions of these things in municipalities across North America.
Yeah, thank you. But I guess some of the water coming in is in plastic or PVC or whatever it is. It's not a solder job, it's a clamp. So I'm just kind of worried about it.
Yeah, because obviously they have changed to kind of a PVC, I think it's called, in the past, decade or 2 decades. But really, you don't hear of too many homes actually that PVC leaking, right? So it's the same type of clamps, it's the same type of plumbing that again has been installed in millions of homes across North America. So that's, if there were significant issues, they would be worked out.
Thank you. Is there like a centralized portal for information that's easily accessible online?
Yes. If you go to the main website, go to the bottom. The bottom, there's about 18 of our highest frequently visited sites, and there's an icon on there that talks about water meters.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we will move on to planning and development. Our planning and development director, Mr. Risling, he has many jobs.
Planning and development, they've been in front of council probably the most over the past 3 months. There's been a lot of work done there with regards to the zoning bylaw changes, and I don't think I'm going to regurgitate a lot of that, but I think there was a lot of fantastic work done there. Obviously, we're happy with the province's decision to provide us with some deadlines with regards to Bill 44. Doesn't mean the work's done. As council knows, there's some additional things that they're going to be doing here over the following year. I think just a couple of the highlights that I wanted to bring up is just that things have not slowed down. The number of department interactions has increased probably about 20% over last year. Third quarter in both the interactions at the front and via email and phone have increased about 400 inquiries over this past quarter compared to last year. So things are still moving along there, but we're definitely happy with what services RD West are providing. Is also part of that service is also with our internal staff. So I think they're keeping on top of things.
No, appreciate all of the work that all of staff has done on all of these issues. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a crazy question. When I was looking at this, it showed the zoning for development permit and variance permits. And then there's a thing called a comfort letter. What the heck is a comfort letter?
A comfort letter is so a lot of times if a property is selling or somebody is purchasing the property, they want to know a lot of the history around that property. So it's a letter that provides a lot of detail on that property. It gives a lot of the background information as far as the permits and the building permits. It takes several hours to actually complete, but is a very thorough overview of that property. So it provides typically new property owners with some comfort that they're purchasing the property doesn't have multiple issues and violations of building codes, etc. So that's what they are.
Okay, any other questions? Any concerns? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Risling. I assume that Councillor Poderica is terminating the meeting, and we have a second.